Sparks Museum podcast is made possible by a grant from the Nevada Humanities and the National Endowment for the Humanities. The podcast is just one of many new features of the Sparks Heritage Museum. To learn more, check out our social media channels or our website at www.sparksmuseum.org. Hello, and welcome to the Sparks Museum podcast. I'm your host and the media manager for the Sparks Heritage Museum, Jessica Johnson. In 1983, Detective Teresa Lightfoot of the Sparks Police was awarded Officer of the Year during a police appreciation luncheon. She began working at the Sparks Police Department in 1970 during a summer teenage opportunity program as a receptionist. She eventually would be hired as a full-time dispatcher, which required a waiver due to her being barely 18 years old. Lightfoot would again need a waiver in 1979, this time for her height when she was hired as a police officer. She was commended at the ceremony for her courage, resourcefulness, and professionalism, particularly in the rescue of 2 young boys from the Truckee River and in her ongoing investigation of sexual assault cases. The runners-up for the award were 2 male police officers, one from the Reno Police and one from the Washoe County Sheriff's Department. Today on the podcast, I sit down with Deputy Chief of the Sparks Police, Tara Edmonson. Deputy Chief Edmonson joined the Sparks Police in March of 2003 and is the first female deputy chief in the city of Sparks. She speaks to the history of the Sparks Police, what makes the Sparks Police unique from other law enforcement services, and the opening of the Sparks Police exhibit on display currently at the Sparks Museum. Please welcome to the podcast, Deputy Chief Tara Edmonson. Hi, Tara. Thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So I want to start off by asking, what personal connection do you have with the city of Sparks?
Well, this is my home. So I was actually born in Carson City. I spent most of my youth there through elementary school. My dad took a job with the Sparks Police Department when I was pretty young, and he was commuting back and forth from the Carson-Dayton area for several years, and it just got to be a little bit too much burden, and we didn't get to see him a lot, obviously. Anyway, and the commute didn't help. And so we moved to Sparks when I was in middle school. So about 11, 12 years old, and I went to Dilworth Middle School here. I'm a Reed High School graduate, and I went away for college and came back. And I missed my family. I missed the environment. I missed being here, and it was really important for me, regardless of where I ended up. I needed to come home for a while after I got done with college. So I never left after that. So this is home. Sparks is home for me.
That's fantastic. And how did you come to be in your current career path?
Well, it was definitely not a direct one. So I was actually pursuing an education in chemistry. I really wanted to go into either pharmaceuticals or be a pharmacist, so still really helping people, but in a different way. I wasn't sure if I wanted to go do the laboratory kind of route where I'm actually making and creating new medicines for people, or like I said, be a pharmacist where I'm, giving medicine on the other side of the coin for folks that are sick and helping them feel better. I was a student athlete in college, and just the demands of both got to be a large burden, and it was just having a hard time balancing between my education and my demands for the sport I was playing and travel associated to it and everything. And so at the time, CSI, crime scene investigation show was getting really popular when I was in college, and I was a big mystery buff when I was growing up, read all the Nancy Drew novels, Sherlock Holmes, all the Agatha Christie mysteries, grew up watching Murder, She Wrote, so I really loved the mystery component. And because of that forensic science twist to it, and then my connection to law enforcement with my dad, I was like, oh, well, I wonder if I can kind of twist my science knowledge and experience and desire to kind of be involved in science into this other bubble. So did that actually for a couple of years after I graduated from college. I worked at the Carson City Sheriff's Office as a forensic technician after I did an internship with the Washoe County Sheriff's Office Crime Lab. And then it just wasn't enough. I was spending a lot of time in a lab. I did some crime scene investigation work, a lot of evidence processing, even in fingerprint identification and drug identification. And it was just not enough personal interaction with people. And I felt that the information loop was lacking. I wanted to know what happened when I was done with it. And so I really started to talk to the deputies there in Carson City about what being an officer was like. It's funny, I never really talked to my dad about it until I really wanted to change jobs. It sounds silly, but it was never in the forefront of my brain. And then Sparks, I applied for Sparks and for the Washoe County Sheriff's Office. I didn't finish the hiring process with the Washoe County Sheriff's Office, and got hired with Sparks PD in 2003 as an officer. So here we are.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And now you have worked your way up. You are deputy chief.
I am.
And so what did that process go like, and what does that duty entail?
Well, I can tell you I am not where I started. So I can definitely tell you I'm much more administrative and managerial now, 20 years later, rather than what I was doing. So being a police officer and really getting, being in the trenches or having my hands dirty with the interaction with people. I interact with people on a different level. My job now is really much more administrative in facilitating and logistical supplies more likely. So I oversee the investigation division of the police department, and that includes major crime investigations, so crimes against person, things like murder, battery with a deadly weapon, sexual assaults, crimes against children, etc., as well as all the property crimes, so like fraud-related crimes, burglary. And then in addition to that investigative section, I also oversee a regional undercover unit. So that includes a lot of folks that dress, in a different style than you would normally anticipate, like an investigation detective to come knock on your door and say, "Hey, I'm following up on your burglary." These folks really do their best to like blend in to the scenery and look like the folks that they're chasing around that are committing these crimes. And their job is to really interrupt crime trends. So we have the Regional Crime Suppression Unit. We also have a Repeat Offender Program unit. And so what they do is they actually monitors habitual criminals. In addition to the investigative side of the house, I also have our internal affairs section. And just what that means is that is an oversight position for accountability for our officers. So if anyone has a complaint or like from inside or outside the department, that's where those complaints get routed through. They also monitor and have early intervention monitoring requirements for how much force we're using on folks and checking in with folks on a regular basis based upon certain criteria. And then I also oversee the support services section, which is all of our community relations activities. So hiring, recruitment, background investigations, in addition to our public information office and crime prevention, and then our community outreach programs, like our homeless outreach program that we have. That team also falls under that branch. So I'm busy. I'm really busy.
That is a lot.
And then I have some other administrative duties like building maintenance, fleet management, and the budget.
Wow. Well, I can say the whole reason why we brought you in today is because the Sparks Museum recently developed a brand new exhibit dedicated to the history of the Sparks Police Department. And I will say, just from my own personal experience, I was welcomed in to come take some photographs for the exhibit into the police department, and it was incredible to see just the variety of different departments working in sync in a city that I think often gets discounted, and kind of that, especially in relation to our nearby partner of West Sparks or Reno. And so I'm really interested in that line of demarcation, because I feel like Reno Sparks gets looped together often. And
yeah, nobody knows where Sparks is. It's just Reno.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, what is the relationship like with, for example, RPD?
We are really fortunate in this region to have very valuable working partnerships with our law enforcement partners in this valley and throughout the state and even into Northern California. So that's a lot of work to nurture those relationships. But the common goal at the end of the day, when we realize it, is that we are chasing around usually the same people for the same types of crimes. And it's just it's happening in each individual jurisdiction, but we're all chasing the same people. So we've just discovered, not like just recently, but we've discovered as a law enforcement group that it's more important to rally our resources and have that force multiplier of all of us working together and sharing all that information together, rather than trying to work it separately and really working harder and not smarter, you know?
Well, that's good to hear that it's not just it's on your land, you deal with it sort of situation.
Exactly. It's not efficient, it's not effective, and it really does a disservice to our community to function that way. Law enforcement does have a tendency to have a lot of ego involved, and we really try, especially in this region, to try and quell that and quash it and keep it down to a dull roar, to really keep the mission in mind, and that's to provide public safety, to make sure that our citizens and all of our community members that live in our area safe, and that they can go about their business and, you know, live fruitful, full lives, you know, without police involvement whenever possible. So I think it's just really maintaining that common goal and that common focus that helps us work together. We do in this region also, we have a lot of regionalized units where members of the Reno Police Department, Washoe County Sheriff's Office, the Sparks Police Department, even UNRPD, and the Nevada State Police participate in various different regional units in the Valley. And so we all work together. Supervision is also shared amongst those units. And it's just to help maintain that common goal. And it's working. It really is working.
Now, I know that the population of Sparks has really increased over the years. We're seeing a lot of movement to this area. And I think the most recent official count that we have is over 108,000 residents in this area. So how many calls does SPD respond to, and what are the challenges with this influx of population?
Yeah, I actually did a little bit of research before this podcast, and we are right around 88,000 calls for service.
Wow. Is it annually?
That was just for 2021 alone. Mm-hmm. We are on track for this year to date to be over that. So all of our monthly calls for service on the calendar year since January, we are on track to be over 88,000 calls for service this year.
Wow.
But yeah, typically we've been over 80,000 calls for service for quite a while. And just on a side note, just the population growth itself. So since 2000 alone, our area has grown, the population has grown by over 64%. So and then in a very small geographic footprint. So we've gone from like this kind of sleepy bedroom community and very suburban to a very urban footprint. So it changes how we do business here as well.
And I'm sure it changes the amount of resources that are also required for your department. What are some of the biggest challenges that you think are facing the department today?
Staffing, for sure. Just on a nationwide trend, right? The police and law enforcement in general has been in the public's eye a lot, and should be for all intents and purposes. We serve the public. We are of the public. The public has every right to demand and question us as to what we do and how we do business. It's just some of that attention has drawn, I think, some not overreactions. I think just people have been very quick to react, to make a choice or make a decision or change laws or change policies and directives where I think there's best of intentions behind it, but they didn't really think them through. So I think, like, for example, a lot of the defunding movements that happened, we were very fortunate in this area to not be subject, and that was not even like a consideration for our elected officials in this area, for any of the agencies in this valley, which we are very fortunate and thankful for. But not other law enforcement agencies across the United States were not so lucky and were defunded by 10% or more of their budget, with the intent, to try and divert those services elsewhere, but there was no plan in place to make that happen. So you froze positions or you laid people off, and then there was no one else to take over those services because those plans weren't put into place. So we were dealing with that on a different level. So as mentioned, before, our population growth has been pretty exponential with that 64% growth in a 21-year period. When I was hired in 2003, we had just right around 100 personnel sworn. That's not including our professional support staff, so just sworn personnel, so just by the status of police officer, and that's all the way from the chief down to a line-level police officer, 100 personnel in 2003. We have 127. So that 64% growth is not reflective in the 27% growth that we have as the police department. So that not growing at the same pace as our population has been a struggle. And then on top of law enforcement in general just not being a super popular profession to get into, it has its own unique challenges in and of itself. Law changes, just the popularity in general and the public scrutiny. Those are all those are all not little deterrents. Those are big deterrents for folks. There are just people who are inherently, I think, bound to serve that will never be deterred by that. And those are the folks that we want to bring out of the folds, and we want them. All of us want them. But we are now at a point in a criticality where, especially in this valley and probably nationwide, we are all now fighting for those same people, and it's a struggle. It is a struggle, and it's a big worry of mine as to how we're going to continue providing the services that we want to serve.
Absolutely. And I think that in addition to awareness movements like the Sparks Heritage Museum putting up our exhibit and items like that, I've seen police presence at a lot of community events, not just in keeping the public safe, but also setting up booths and giving out information. Can you talk about some of the events that Sparks Police does try and present a different image that maybe we are otherwise used to?
Yeah, it's one of the critical tenets of just community-oriented policing is having those non-law enforcement related contacts. We want to talk to people when they're actually having a relatively good day and not just always talk to them when they're having a bad day. I think it's really important for us, and it's we call it a deposit in our bank, right? We build those relationships. We're building community trust. We're building those bridges for people to want to share and provide information for us on crimes that may occur in an area, to report it at all. If they see something, we want them to say something, and so to do that, they need to trust that we're going to do the right thing for the right reasons. So those community events are really, really important to us, and we enjoy it. It is fun. It's fun to interact with people on a level to where there's a bubble of positivity happening, and we all get to kind of exhale and relax a little bit, and people can ask questions that they wouldn't normally be able to ask if they were exposed to some sort of level of trauma or some sort of act that is distracting them. They're not going to ask about a job in the city of Sparks after their car's been burglarized. That's not typically how this works. Or they're in a car accident and they're like, hey, how do I become a police officer? It typically doesn't happen that way. So we really focus on those community events. So some of the examples are, we really try to focus on the kiddos. So we'll do like big dig events, and that's a pretty big partnership with Washoe County. And then we partner with like Peterbilt and some of the other folks that are in our industrial area in Sparks to participate in that event. There's the Music at the Marina or the Rock on the River events that the city does. Of course, there's Hot August Nights coming up, the Rib Cook-Off, and then those are sanctioned events by the city of Sparks. But we really do try to have a big officer presence down there and have some of those extracurricular events down there. We try and do a lot of child ID events, especially like around Halloween, and a lot of school related show and tells, so to speak. And we really try to we're working towards getting into some better partnerships with our faith-based community as well, and share some time with them, just because I think it's a great opportunity to just be able to sit and talk with folks. And share some common interests and get the word out there that, we're there for them regardless of who you or what you believe in. Yeah. So it just helps keep us grounded. And I think it normalizes and humanizes our police officers as well.
Now, I know a highlight at a lot of these public events, and it certainly was at the grand opening of the Sparks Museum exhibit, is the canine unit. And we have a whole section of the exhibit dedicated to Tom and his fleet of dogs. Could you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the canine unit was something that we had historically in the police department. It went away just through, I think, change of leadership and could have been lack of interest. I'm not entirely sure why it went away to begin with, and then it resurfaced in 2005 with 2 officers, and really, I think, broke the mold on the ability and the importance of of having, effective police service dogs in our agency. It's a great tool. It's a great asset. And it builds great relationships because everyone, right? Because I think it's really funny. People have a tendency to flock towards the animal side of things rather than people. It seems to break down some barriers and be able to, I think people are more willing to start having conversations about dogs or horses or whatever other, service animals that might be, in the mix. And then you can start having some other, conversations as well. I think it just has a tendency to melt those barriers down. So it's been super instrumental. Our dogs are constantly doing, meet and greets with the kids, and they have all of the animals that we've gotten, have great personalities. They're very people oriented, and then they've got like an awesome work switch. They know when it's time to go to work, and then they know when it's time to get love. So we're very fortunate and lucky that our canine team, they work really, really hard to maintain that. They work a lot of overtime to maintain and keep those relationships with our community and be accessible to the community. They've got a calendar out that they've built their own little canine association as well. They've built their own canine program or canine calendar this year to help build funds. And those funds actually go towards veterinary care and other long-term care after the dog actually retires from the police department. It helps maintain some care because, dogs can get expensive, and working dogs especially, when they break big. So they don't have, a good stop button most of the time. So they play hard.
Sure.
It's usually pretty expensive to get them back up and running again. So we as a department pay for all of that because obviously they're owned by the city. But when they retire, the handlers have an opportunity to basically buy their dog back and adopt them. So this canine association helps pay for those funds. So it's all good things. Honestly, it just keeps everyone. It keeps the police department in the forefront of people's brains, and that we're here for them, and that we're not an untouchable entity that we can't not be approached and just say hi.
Now, we recently had on the podcast Councilwoman Charlene Bybee, who was talking about the 50th anniversary of Title IX. And I'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the opportunities for women, seeing as it continues to be a hot topic in the media, even though I so wish that it wouldn't. Can you speak to any statistics on female law enforcement officers in Nevada, specifically in Sparks? But also, in a larger sense, can you speak about the opportunities for women today in law enforcement as a whole?
I can try. So on a national level, there hasn't been a national-wide study in a long time just about women specifically in law enforcement. And the last study that was done, I think, is a little outdated, and I think probably isn't as accurate anymore, and I think it's a good thing. But the national standard on the last research that was done was that women in law enforcement only averaged about 12 to 13%. We, as far as Sparks Police goes, we average right around that national average. Right now, as it stands, we're at a 10% average of women in our department. We have, I can't speak to the state of Nevada as a whole. Detention, so sheriff's offices and sheriff's offices with larger detention facilities have a tendency to have a better diverse population in officer, especially men to women. I can't say why, other than the fact that it just seems to work out that way on a national trend. So law enforcement in general, it can have some physical challenges. It requires some mental and physical toughness. But there's no size or height requirements or anything like that. So I think it's just, you have to have an inherent desire to serve a greater population than yourself. You're essentially serving outside of yourself. You're doing something bigger than you. And women, I think, fit that mold very, very well. And women, as well as other, culturally diverse, populations, it's representative of the communities we serve, right? So women have a place at that. Women have a place in the table to be in law enforcement. Women need to be involved in law enforcement. We think differently, we problem solve differently, we build relationships differently, and we just have a tendency to see the lens differently. And I think people discount law enforcement as an option. It's an incredibly noble profession. I think it's one of the last noble professions. I love this job. I highly encourage anyone that would love to have that challenge to reach out and ask questions, ask why you can't. And for me personally, I chose to have a family later in life, so I currently have a 3-year-old. But you can do both. You can have everything. You can have your family time. You can be a mommy. You can be a deputy chief. And you can do all of those things. It's balance. And so right now for us, Sparks, we've actually joined, we did it last year. We joined, it's called the 30 for 30 initiative. And so we have basically joined in pledge to focus on hiring and recruiting of women. And the goal is to have a hiring percentage of about 30% by 2030.
Oh, wow.
So that's a nationwide project, and we're working towards it, and we'll see what happens. But I'm excited. I'm excited for the future. I really am excited for the ladies that I have currently working in the department. I can't wait to see where they go and where their careers take them, and I'm just excited that I get to be a part of it, and I get to watch. So glass ceilings are being broken every day, right? It's inevitable. And I really think people don't necessarily set out to be trailblazers, but people need to see that people like them are in those positions and that it's attainable. And I'm here to tell you that it's attainable. You can do it. If you put your mind and effort, and it's all the blood, sweat, and tears that goes along with it, but you can do it.
Well, I think it was so amazing to see, not only in the research that we had to delve into in order to build the exhibit, but also on that opening day event to see all of the Sparks PD that were welcome to the event. The amount of diversity in the room was really encouraging. And in thinking about the exhibit, I want to know, because you were there that day.
Yeah.
And we have had an overwhelming response since the opening of that visit from people who were family members of individuals who used to work for the Sparks Police Department, or people who actually physically work there who want to donate items. Were you at all impacted by the response that you received being at that event? And maybe what is your favorite aspect of the exhibit?
Yeah, I was just getting goosebumps while you were just describing all that just now. Our agency itself, we have always prided ourselves on being very family oriented. And so I quite literally, since the time that my dad started working at the Sparks Police Department, grew up in the police department, and I babysit other people's kids. I knew who all of these folks were. I knew who almost, 80% of the folks that showed up at the opening, which was it was so nice to see. It was so nice to see people, know that they're a part of our history. And history is important because, right, it's what carries our stories and it's what gets passed along, but it also helps us learn, right? You learn from our mistakes, you learn what we did right, you learn what we did wrong, and it helps us progress and move forward. So history is incredible to see the changes that we've made over time, especially in law enforcement and especially through the Sparks Police Department. So I was overwhelmed by the desire to be a part of it and to share. It's most law enforcement officers, and this is probably not a fair assumption or a stereotype, and I should probably only just point my finger at myself at this, have a tendency to be very quiet and withdrawn, and you don't wave that flag very often. It's just not a very popular thing to do. And so when people ask what you do for a living, you have a tendency to take pause as to who's asking and how am I going to answer this? Am I going to tell them I'm a police officer, or do I just say I work for the city of Sparks? And that's changed, right? It didn't always used to be that way, but it makes you feel like you almost have to hide. You have a secret identity. But you have to be very careful and you have to be very cautious now, and it didn't always have to be that way. And so when you retire, right, because of who you were for so long, a piece of you kind of goes away, right? You've transitioned into not the officer, or the detective, or the sergeant, or the lieutenant, or the commander, or whoever you were when you retired, into you're just Joe, right? And so to know that you're up on that wall in some way, shape, or form, or like your history lives on, and you'll be forever memorialized and forever remembered in some way, shape, or form by someone. I think it's just invaluable. And that family component, regardless of whether or not we truly knew each other or not, I think progresses as well. I think that it's forever just kind of etched in people's hearts and minds that once you're part of the Sparks PD family, you're always part of the Sparks PD family, and that's priceless.
Where do you see the future of policing and law enforcement in a city like Sparks heading, especially with some of the inherent challenges of growth and development of late?
I foresee us really trying to hone in on technology to our advantage, again, to kind of, coin the phrase or circle back around to it, right, is that working smarter, not harder, and using the resources that we have available to us. So technology, as we can all attest to, is very much embedded in a part of our lives, and it is really paramount for us in the city of Sparks, I think, to use that to our advantage, and really capitalize on technology to help us do our jobs more effectively and efficiently, and still, at the end of the day, provide people face time with a police officer when they truly need one. So I think it's just really focusing on the improvement and addition. So improving on the technology that we have, and then adding additional technologies as they become available to help our officers do our jobs better and provide a better service, and continue to do that, it just under the anticipation that we will continue to have some limited resources here and there. So it's really focusing on technology to help us do our jobs, is where I see us going. What that looks like, that's kind of the fun part, is because technology changes so fast and so much that when you can create the demand, someone inevitably will create the supply. So I think that's kind of the fun part, is that I don't know. I can see the path and I can see the light, but I don't know how we're going to get there yet, or what it looks like. So it's cool.
Well, I think that's such a interesting thing to think about, because in our exhibit we have a polygraph machine and a radar speed reader and a radio and all sorts of technology that, when you think about the city of Sparks, we are just over 100 years old. That's not very old in the grand scheme of the history of the world. And yet, look how far the technology has already come, that those items are museum worthy. Right.
We literally carry around mini computers in our pocket at all time, and officers who first started, they would have radio call boxes. So the radios were one way, and so they would get told that they need to call in, and they would stop and pull over at designated locations and open up a key box, essentially, to call dispatch to find out what their call for service was. And now we have computer systems in our cars. We have GPS units where dispatch can literally see where we are and help guide us into something, and give us directions while we're doing it in real time, and even help create perimeters when we have a missing kiddo, or we're trying to just find someone, who might have just committed a crime, and we're trying to set up a perimeter to contain them. So the science and the technology that's out there, it's phenomenal. It's stuff that I grew up literally watching on TV going, that's so cool, and I hope we get to do that one day.
In our exhibit, we were able to incorporate so many fun aspects, like a scrapbook of different articles and memories, the original jail cell panels from the 1941 jail that's now a photo op, Sparky the car. Is there any particular artifact that is your favorite in that area?
Oh, gosh. No, I can't pick one. I can't just pick one thing. I'm really grateful that, sorry, I'm going to get emotional about it. I'm really glad that Larry's on the wall.
Yeah.
I knew Larry. I was a kid when he was murdered. My dad was a supervisor.
And
so,
just for context, this is Officer
Larry Johnson. Yeah, so he is right now, to date, the one and only officer that's been killed in the line of duty for the Sparks Police Department, which is phenomenal, and I'm super grateful for. But he was a great man. He was a great man, and he was a really good police officer, and it's a tragedy. And good Lord, sorry. So yeah, I'm super grateful that we got to share him with our public so that he knows how important he was to us, and that he will get to live on forever. So yeah, so that's it.
Absolutely. And just being able to visit the police department and see the memorial that your building has set up for him, and how you welcome his family continually, who still lives on in this community and celebrates his memory every year.
Yeah, every year.
Is so special. And I think that leads perfectly into the final question that I have for you, which is, what do you think makes the Sparks Police Department different from other law enforcement agencies?
It's family. We know each other. We know each other's names. There's agencies that are they're so big that you see someone walking in the hall and you have no idea who they are. And so it's really important, especially for the chief, Chief Crawforth and Deputy Chief Bellamy and myself, to know everyone who's in the building, and know who they are, know their names, know what's going on in their lives. Even if we've got to, figure it out in different channels, we really pride ourselves on knowing, what's going on with them, and asking, right? And it's important to ask and check in and know that they matter and have value. And so I think that's what sets us apart from, I think, just other agencies. And it's not to say that other agencies don't do this. I think, for Sparks, this is how we've been. This is why I chose Sparks. This is why I chose to work here, because it was family, and a family environment. And we've really prided ourselves on keeping and maintaining that culture within our agency. And like I said, once you're a Sparks PD family, you're always Sparks PD family, and we will do whatever we can to take care of you. We don't always get along, right? Families don't always get along, but we love each other, and that's important. And because you have to love the people that you work with, to do what we do every day, because you have to trust that they're going to be there for you. So.
That feeling was certainly palpable at that opening day event, and it's palpable right here again with you talking about it. So I wanted to thank you for that. And now we're going to move on to our big three questions.
Okay.
These are the questions that we ask each and every one of our guests when they come on. So we start with, what sparks you about Sparks? What do you think makes it an interesting or unique place to live, work, or visit?
I think Sparks is now, especially now, it's really getting to be like the best of both worlds. It still, I think, has that small, homey feel, but it's got big things going on. So, and it's changing, right? We're watching it change and develop before our eyes. And so for just to be a member of this community, I live in the city of Sparks, so just watch it happen. I think, it's phenomenal that we are progressing and changing, but the intent, it's intentional. Like, the change is intentional, and to make it better, to make it more diverse, to make it more equitable for people of all socioeconomic levels. Where the goal should be to be this welcoming city, and to really set ourselves apart from. Not that it's not important to be, East Reno or, West Sparks, but we to provide a different level of service and community that sets us apart from Reno, or even the unincorporated areas that Washoe County serves. So it's changing. And I think the fact that it's changing and can change, and there's a willingness to change, I think is kind of what makes it unique, because I think some places have a tendency to be very stagnant, and like, this is the old way and this is how we've always used to do it. And I don't always know that that's the right way. So.
Do you have a favorite story or moment from Sparks' history? This could be either a personal memory that you'd like to share, or if there was anything that happened that was newsworthy that you remember. This could even be a memory of an event or something recent.
So when I was growing up, so the event has changed, and I don't even think it exists. No, I can tell you it doesn't exist anymore. It's just more because it morphed into something else, and I think the intent behind it changed a little bit. But when I was growing up, the old farmers markets downtown, they were always on Thursdays, and in fact, I even think they started out to be twice a week, and then they just converted into like that one day a week, and I want to say it was Thursdays. But it was such a cool place. There was live music, there was the crafts. It was just having like a little mini special event every Thursday. My dad was working at that time. They probably hated it, but I loved going down there. And I think I loved going down there because I could go see him. So when he was down there working, I could go down there and see him, and we could, get a cold drink, get a lemonade, or, get a bite to eat. And then, we'd get our produce, and then we'd leave, and I loved that. It was a time and opportunity to be able to see my dad when it wasn't a super stressful moment, but he was at work, and it wasn't awkward and and uncomfortable, like to go like introduce yourself to a bunch of other people that I knew who he was working with, right? So it was just walking up into a crowd of other police officers and just to go say hi to my dad kind of thing. That was my whole family. It was like going and saying hi. It was like going to have a family reunion every time you went and did it. So that was really cool. And that's probably one of the cool moments of just, being a teenager, I think, at the time, and, wanting to go see my dad at work. So
that is excellent. And we get so many people that come through the museum that reminisce about that farmer's market. It is very missed. So that's so excellent to hear you share that. Yeah. Thank you. And our last question, since we are a museum that is dedicated to preserving artifacts and oral histories, and we believe that every story from this Truckee Meadows region is worth sharing, I was wondering, and this could be any item, not just relating to the police, is there any item that you are either aware of or that you might personally own that you believe is museum worthy, perhaps even Sparks Museum worthy? And you don't have to donate it, but we would take it off your hands.
There's things that I have in my personal life that was, passed down through family. But I don't think anybody else would care about it.
Oh, well, you never know.
I don't. I wish I had to. I wish it was much more specific to like the Truckee Meadows. It's just, I guess the fun fact, I have some fun facts. I mean, it's not, I don't know that it's museum worthy. My dad actually, so the GSR now, my dad actually helped build that. So before he got into law enforcement, he was in construction and was in carpentry with my grandfather. And it was the Bally's back then.
Yeah.
And they helped build that. It was part of that construction project. And there's several other buildings. Worked on the Ormsby House down in Carson City, and
that is incredible. So your family is steeply
we're embedded. Yeah. So, and it's funny because both my parents were very much my families before settling in the Carson City in the Sparks area were very much nomads before that. So my dad was from California in the Bay Area and moved around a lot because he was in carpentry with my grandfather, and then my mom, my grandfather was also attached to building and construction firms, but he was a CPA. And so they moved constantly. And so like Carson City became like home base for them in like the late 70s or mid to late 70s. And it just, that's been home ever since. My grandmother still lives in Carson, and
wow. So. Well, and that was an exciting time to live here. There was so much change going on. And I feel like we're in a new period of change right now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We're going to blink our eyes and probably hardly even recognize the place.
Wow. Well, we are going to look forward to seeing what comes in the future for both the City of Sparks and the Sparks PD. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
The Sparks Museum podcast is funded in part by a grant from the Nevada Humanities and the National Endowment for the Humanities. It is produced and recorded at the podcast recording studio at Sparks' own AntSpace Co-working Entrepreneurial Hub, a place for entrepreneurs, made by entrepreneurs. We really want to get the word out about our brand new audio series, so please spread the word about our new podcast by taking a moment to rate, review, and share this episode. Do you have a favorite story of Sparks that you want to hear on the podcast? Email info@sparksmuseum.org to share any recommendations. We would love to hear from you. We also invite you to visit the Sparks Heritage Museum on 814 Victorian Avenue. The museum is open Tuesdays through Saturdays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Please come visit and be a part of our ongoing efforts to tell the Sparks story. We'll see you next time.